Welcome to Stories from Sight, the renovation podcast that digs a little deeper. I'm Amy Dornalick, and together with my co-host Jane Middlehurst, we peek behind the curtains of those Insta-worthy interiors to bring you the real processes people went through to make their dream homes a reality. This week we talked to Lee, the founder of Bert and May Tiles, about his latest home renovation. We discuss his approach to creating timeless interiors, the art of slow renovating to create a space rich in layers and materiality, plus the environmental need to consider our purchases and avoid renovation waste. Hi Lee, welcome to Stories from Sight. We're particularly excited to talk to you today as both me and Jane are a little bit obsessed with tiles. And so we have been big Bert and May fans actually from the start.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
I would really love to know a bit about where you're sitting right now. Could you describe your home?
So we live in a little village just outside of York called Poppleton. It's around 2 miles from York, and my two girls go to school in central York. So we wanted something that was close enough to town that it's kind of convenient and school runs are not too painful, but we wanted a bit of space. So we kind of took the option of having a lovely garden, having that kind of entertaining space at home, but sacrificing that kind of real proximity into the city. So it's a very pretty little village with a maypole, a couple of pubs, village shop, all the essentials.
You need a maypole, I mean.
I have to say, I've used the pub more than the maypole.
I think that's a shame. Do you want to talk a little bit about your story of how you got to this house and your renovation history? Because this isn't your first property, is it?
No, it's not. So my journey, my kind of property journey, if you will, started in Spain, actually. So I owned rented houses until then and moved out to southern Spain. I was a lawyer in London and knew that I didn't want to be a lawyer, but I didn't really know what I wanted to be. So I thought that I would go out and learn Spanish, do something entirely different. Found this amazing part of Spain called Vejer, which is on the Costa de la Luz of Spain. And that's where my kind of passion for interiors and property really came about. And I discovered, I think, in that journey of building what is now a little boutique hotel, just how important the raw materials are and how if you get that right, if you get the kind of architectural materials to the correct palette, everything else is very simple and they can all be styled very easily and very differently. So where I actually now live is in this lovely it's a beautiful kind of cottage in this village of Poppleton, 2 workers' cottages knocked together into one family home. And we bought that about a year and a half ago and gutted it. And I can talk you through, if you like, how we did it. But fundamentally for me, I've learned about materials and blending the right materials together and just how important that texture is to give that longevity. And I know it's a bit of a kind of buzzword to use timeless because everybody wants to be timeless. But I think a great sign of all our success is if you actually create an interior that can be dressed and styled differently without the need to rip things out. So for me, it's going in there and it feeling like it could be there forever. So I know my flooring could be there forever. And I don't just do it as a plug for tiles. I have beautiful reclaimed wooden floors, which I would never want to change. Even if my style changes and I want to go with pinks and greens and just, wallpapers, all of it will work if you get the core materials right.
That's really interesting. You knocked through these cottages, but did you do an extension as part of it?
No, so we were lucky enough that the 2 cottages were they had 2 kitchens, 2 staircases, but it was actually one house. But it very much was a house of 2 halves. So the kind of rear of the property already had this kind of quite impressive glass elevation on. And it was actually an architect that owned it before us. So he looked like he'd almost done half a house. So he kind of done this quite impressive thing on the back, left his cottages on the front. And I think he and his wife almost just lived in the new bit and forgot about the old bit. So our kind of job was to unite the 2 halves. And the only way I could do that was really stripping back everything on the cottages side to its bones in the hope that we'd find things. So like it's a process of discovery with old properties. Sometimes it can be a little kind of alarming from a budget perspective, what happens on an old property, but it had been stripped of its character. It had false ceilings. It had plasterwork over exposed brick chimney breasts. So I just wanted to kind of get a chisel out and rip it all out and see what we had and then build it back together.
And what did you find? Did you find good bones, or did you have to kind of do some repair work?
Well, there's a bit of both, but what I did find is I found beautiful old beams upstairs that had actually there'd been a fire in the house in many moons gone by. So they were all tarnished and gnarly and really gorgeous. I found 2 chimney breasts that had just been totally hidden, which again, and one of them's in the hallway, and just with a little bit of an eBay fireplace on that gorgeous exposed brick wall, suddenly it feels like an incredible space. We found windows at some point in its past, and it can't have been that many years ago, but the previous owners had actually had windows in the roof. So when we did expose the ceilings upstairs, I suddenly thought, oh my God, but we've exposed the beams, but there's also some beautiful natural light coming in. So it was just really exciting. Original Yorkshire stone floor in the office, hidden underneath some kind of pretty Joe Average porcelain tiles. So really, really fun, really cool process.
So when you're in that initial kind of, you're stripping back, obviously you're discovering things as you go along, but did you already have a fairly clear picture of what you were going to create at that very early stage? Did you have your final finishes chosen, or did that happen organically as the project went along?
So I knew the spaces I wanted to create. I'm not such a maverick that I would just kind of get the hammer and chisel and just let's see. So I knew that I wanted 4 bedrooms. I knew that I wanted 4 bathrooms. I knew that I wanted the sitting room and an office. But actually the distribution of that was very much dictated by the beams, for example, because I didn't want to lose a beam underneath the partition wall. So I knew the space kind of master planning, so to speak, that we wanted, but I didn't know exactly where they'd be. And certainly things like thresholds and door heights, again, very dependent on what we found. In terms of finishes, it's probably something that I really learned, I think, over the last God knows how many years now. People used to say, oh, you're so young for what you do. I never get accused of that anymore. So over the last 20 odd years of doing interesting properties, the biggest tip I can give people is don't pick your finishes until the very end, unless you have to. So live with it as bare plaster walls. Like, don't worry about colors. So many of us, when we're doing a property, kind of think, well, they get the mood boards out, and obviously running a Bert and May, I see it all the time. Clients come with their Pinterest boards and Instagram images, and they'll almost like envisage the color of the towels with the wall color. And I just think it's a mistake. I think we need to take more considered decisions. And if you don't have to pick those things until you live in it for a while, then do delay it, because you will change your mind. And it's actually, I don't know, it's just, you should enjoy that process. Do you want it dark and moody? Do you want it classic? Do you want bare plaster walls? I mean, it's very hard, even if you're a very skilled interior designer or an architect, to kind of really be sure, I think, at the outset of a project.
And did you have any help? Like, do you kind of work with an architect or an interior designer, or are you working directly with a builder? Like, what's the setup?
Yeah, I definitely need help, but my partner and I kind of do it by ourselves. We have a trusted team of builders that we've used before. I use skilled people for things like the drawings and the draftsmanship of everything. So I do think it's really important, once you know your layout, do get an architect to come in and do the proper drawing so your builder is working to plan. Do have an electrical plan and a plumbing plan, because it can be disastrous for a budget for you to be moving heated towel rails around at the last minute. So I think that's what I tend to do. I do the things I can't do, or at least I can't do well, with people that are experts in it. But the rest of it, I do it myself.
And are you physically doing stuff as well? Like, how much of a DIY are you?
So my partner, Phil, is a huge DIYer. But he's also a Yorkshireman, so he's super tight. So he'd always want to have a crack at anything himself. I do think we would still be living in the one bit of the one room of the one cottage with one kitchen as a bathroom as well. But he has a go at everything. I have to say, I'm a bit of a kind of, I like the idea of it. I'll give everything a go, but I move on to the next thing probably a bit too quickly.
Yeah. You do have to have such patience with DIY. I think it's the prep work that gets me. I just want the finished look.
Yeah, same. I'll often go in and be like, oh, this would be amazing as a lime wash paint. And I'll be there and I'll do that like one patch and I'll be like stroking it, saying, look how amazing it is. Then I'll be like, oh dear, it's like a week's work of this now.
So you've got this house of two halves that one half was kind of already done. Was that half, like whilst you were doing the works, did you just seal off that part and you didn't touch it?
No, so I've probably not been entirely clear though. Whilst it was done in the sense of built, it definitely wasn't done in the sense of the interior. So the downstairs part, as you'll see on the images, it was of the extension is now our family room kitchen. And that just had like a white plastic shiny IKEA kitchen with grey tiles. And it was super average, if I'm being honest with you. No architectural features at all, but it did have these amazing windows onto the garden. And then upstairs in that extension, as I said, the previous owners literally lived in only this bit, was their bedroom and their sitting room. So what is our now big bedroom master suite? I shouldn't call it apparently a master suite anymore, principal suite. That was the living room. That's now our bedroom. And it's fantastic. It's just an amazing space. We've just wooden cladded our bedroom in this white timber, which is really kind of brings it in slightly because it's quite high ceilings and we didn't want to get rid of that, but it's not exactly cozy feeling. It was kind of slightly cavernous. So putting this cladding has really softened it and created a really lovely textured space. And downstairs, we took out the kitchen, we tiled the floor with a beautiful kind of soft, we call it a raw Zalige tile, so Moroccan handmade tile. And then we installed a Devol kitchen, the haberdasher's kitchen in there. And with the space not having anything architecturally of interest, I wanted the kitchen to be a bit interesting. So that particular kitchen from Devol has quite a lot of detail. It has lots of glass in it and it's got this beautiful prep table with marble on the top. So it works.
It's such an incredible, I'm just looking at the photos and I think the textures and the materiality of the spaces just shines through. And I love how you've kind of exposed things. There's a lot of layers to it. I mean, you've got timber cladding that then runs onto the ceiling. There's, your fireplace with the tiles there. And, there's a lot going on in some ways, but it kind of all works together. What's the process of doing that?
I think when you love something, go for it. Don't half bake it. So if you love wood cladding, like I just love wood cladding, I think it changes a room. It's cozy. It feels just like you want to have a glass of wine in there. You want to read in there. It's just brilliant. So why not make it a cabin? Don't worry about it. Put it on the ceiling, put it on the walls, do it properly, but don't kind of do it half-assed really. The same with the flooring. I love the plain tiles, the Zalige tiles. So, lots of people say, well, maybe you should have a rug of it here, or maybe you should just do it, just have it everywhere. And I think it's calming actually going into it. And I think when you're confident about your own space and people, when they walk into it, feel there is a sense of confidence about the interior. It's in itself quite proud of itself. And I like that.
Well, it's interesting because none of it is shouting, but it works so beautifully.
I think if my real passion is materials, as we talked about earlier, invest in materials. And clearly I'm going to want you to invest in tiles, but I understand there are other materials. So beautiful stone, beautiful timbers. If you do that, I don't think they clash at all. It's like our kitchen has beautiful marble. It's then got a copper top to it. And then we've got a stainless steel range next to it. I mean, on the face of it, you would say, oh dear, don't mix stainless steel with copper and marble. The fact that they're all beautiful materials in themselves, they work. They're not kind of pretending to be anything other than themselves. And I just think that's the key. Pick things you love and roll with it.
As each project happens, do you feel confidence growing? Or do you think this kind of just do it attitude was there from the beginning?
No, it wasn't there from the beginning. It's definitely learned behavior. You know, frankly, we all need to see the fruits of our labor, and you get friends and family commenting and saying, oh, that really is lovely. But I'm absolutely clear now in my head with clients as well. And I'm sure you guys in your profession have seen it before. I try my best and tell a client to tell me about them. What are you like? Do you want to feel sexy when you go in your bathroom in the morning? Is it bright? Are tell me those things, because I think that's easier to help people if they're clear on that. And I wanted a space that felt calm. I wanted it actually to feel quite Mediterranean, that kitchen space in some ways. I wanted lots of plants. I wanted it to feel quite healthy. Kids always on devices, telly's always on. I wanted to create a space that didn't shout that. It was more about cooking. It was more about reading. It was more about having the doors open. And I think that's quite, for me, an important way to design. It's thinking about you as a family. Who are you? What do you like? And how are you going to live in it?
I like that you've basically designed a no screen zone, because you're right. Like, you want to be in that cabin bit and just get cozy.
I have to say though, Amy, it's definitely not a no screen zone with a 14-year-old and 11-year-old, but it's designed in a way to minimize it. Yeah.
Yeah. They can be hiding around the corner. You can't see it.
And they do. But it's a challenge for a modern family. And I think one of the things I loved this weekend, and it sounds cliche and I promise you it's true. I'm not just saying it for our interview now. It was one of the best moments I had this weekend with the kids, because I was in that kitchen. I'm not a great cook. I can make a good spag bol and a good curry, and that tends to be everything that's in the fridge. But this weekend, the kids Iris said to me, Dad, I want to make mince pies. Lila said, okay, I'll make a cake with Phil and we'll do a bit of a competition. He's got the best bake-off going. And we were all in that kitchen space around that big prep table, hanging out, cooking, laughing, joking, arguing, competing, all those kind of things that families do. And I thought, this is actually what you want. You've created a space that is a genuine living space for a family to enjoy each other's company.
Well, I love that. I'm going to be really practical now, because I'm just really interested in this concept about living in the space and experiencing it, and then kind of growing into those interiors and adding things as you go along. Because I guess that's, in a way, that's kind of the opposite to what we often tell people, because the renovation process happens so fast and people need to make decisions on the fly, and then it doesn't really work out that well. Can you describe the kind of time journey from that really heavy work to these extra things that you've done? Obviously, maybe have you done things since you moved in and experienced that space and then added stuff to that?
Yeah, so I think the main thing for me is the kind of choice of, when you come to the finishes of a property, are what we all see. They're the things that I think are super, super important. So as well as the materials, you've then got, the materials, when I refer to them, I'm not referring to obviously plaster and the actual block work. I'm referring to the core finishes, really. So there's two layers of finishing. That core finishing, the core that you pick at the outset of your project, or that you go hunting for within your existing property, fundamental, get it right and nail that down. The secondary layer of finishing, I think, can be left and should be left for as long as you possibly can. So in our case, I always leave the walls plaster. I never do any painting. I try, and even sometimes, when it comes to things like the architectural hardware, I don't really think it's necessary to be picking that. But you can use what you've already had. In our case, we just had the old plastic ones, so we just put those back on. And fabrics and colours and paint they transform a space. And I know that some people will look at this and say, yeah, but I just want to live in it. I just want to get it ready. And it's got to be there. I've got to pick that exact curtain and that carpet runner and all of those things. I never had any carpet runners. There was no fabrics and the curtains. There was nothing really. I think figure it out with the bones and layer as you go is a really successful way of doing it. And I'd say it for two reasons. One is you get it right, and you actually, if money's an issue, why are you wasting it? Why are you getting people in or doing it yourself and wasting cash? But also, and this is something I'm passionate about, as I think a lot of us should be really aware of, is like, let's be a bit more responsible when we're purchasing than just trying to get things done quickly, and not be even buying anything that we buy from a shop has been produced by somebody, and it's been produced by our planet. And do we really just want to be making these flippant decisions because you can? Or can you wait and just think and enjoy the process? This is somewhere that should reflect us as people. It's our personalities in a room or in a home. Take your time. Like some people will get it. They'll know it from day one. And who am I to say don't do it from day one? Do it if you know it. But I think a lot of us don't. And I think it should be something we encourage, like enjoy it with your kids, talk about it. How are we going to do this? What do you reckon? Should we make it all moody and like an evening room? And how are you seeing it? Get your kids engaged with design. That has to be a good thing too.
It's interesting because we have just talked to another home renovator who maybe has had to do a long renovation and slow. And I think she's right in the middle where it just feels hard going. And and I guess I love what you're saying, but I think sometimes the reality of that isn't felt by the people in the process. Can you give them any advice on how to find the joy? And because I think there's like decision fatigue in renovating, and often there is a builder who's saying, look, I need this by this, otherwise there's going to be a delay on site, or, I think people feel very pressured to make those decisions. And what would you say to that?
That's a really big question. I feel like
sorry, that's such a hard
question. It's a really good question, but it's one that we've all kind of empathized with, don't we? We've all been there in that that person's shoes, really. A few bits of advice is, firstly, doing your house is the biggest investment you'll ever make. And it's something you need to really plan carefully and get the right experts helping you. If you financially alone, doing it right, getting the right team on board makes absolute sense. So just because I work in this industry and I happen to do more myself, I am not advocating people should project manage themselves. I'm not advocating that they don't need an architect or an interior designer. It's actually the opposite. If you get the right team, your project will be more cost efficient and you'll get what you want at the end of it. What I think, if you've got that kind of in place, I do think it's right to plan it in a way that you're not rushing the end bits, the end finishes. And I think it's that part that I disagree with anybody that says, but I just need to know now what colors it is, what furniture it is, what curtains it is. And I think that is the home. That is what, when we walk in, people say, I've been in Jane's house and I love it because of X, Y, Z. They don't come in really and feel the distribution so much. That, it's just sometimes, but on the whole, it's the finishes. So I think it's this Amazon Prime world that we've now come into, that we feel this pressure to complete, to get it quicker. I do it myself. You go online and you're like, I want to buy, oh my God, it's not going to be here for 2 days. It's ridiculous. And it's that is impacting our behavior across all areas. Yeah. And I think in some areas it's probably positive. We're more efficient. We're saying, let's get on with it. Let's not go backwards if we can get things in a more efficient way. But I don't believe in the case of design that is the right move. I think it should be a process. And I think layering, as one of you mentioned, is that's the key, one of the key sort of design words really to create a successful interior. It should take time. It should be a jigsaw. It should be all different things that you found or whatever, but it's layers, definitely.
I feel like it is quite a positive take on the phasing because, with the price of construction costs right now, everybody is having to phase their works in some kind of way. And to think of that as a positive and think of, the benefits that you'll get from that slow thought process and growing to your house, I think that's a really nice takeaway.
One of my rooms at the moment, that big kitchen space, I'm desperate. I hope the window company are listening, but I'm desperate to put in this crystal window, kind of divider between the two spaces. And I could have gone with a cheaper option. I could have had something made for a fraction of the price, but I know what I want. I know that finish is what I want. So even though it would be better now with a wooden set of glass doors and they're affordable, I don't want to make that decision. I want to wait until you've got what you want, because again, that eco message of not putting things in to rip them out is something that I think we should be taxed on. We should be penalized for it. It's irresponsible, and I don't think it's good for us. It's not good for our souls to see skips being filled for landfill.
I think the other thing that kind of came to mind as you were talking is like just taking a bit longer on site with your builder and not having them kind of rushing through the process, because they're under so much pressure as, they have deadlines they've got to get through to the next thing. It's all the margins are so tight for everybody in the industry. And I think it's interesting because then, like you say, there's a skip outside that's full of stuff that then, just gets put out of your sight, and it's like, oh, outside, out of mind. And it's interesting because were you mindful of the kind of the skips and the waste as you were renovating? Like, how did you approach that side of things?
Yeah, I've seen it and I've learned that lesson. And I think it's, again, advice to people. You are the client. You are the ones in charge. Like, don't be pressured by someone else's margin requirement. If they haven't priced it correctly, then that's their issue. And that's why you need an experienced team. But you looking after your own property, and that what's going in the skip is yours. Like, before someone else makes that decision, have a think about it. Just think about whether you can do something good from it, whether it actually enhances your interior. Can it be sold or can it be gifted? So many options are now available to us. So I think it's really important when you first start the property, just think about those bones that may come out of it, but don't let the builder just put you under that intense pressure to say, well, this is the way we do it. Well, I think we have done it that way for a long time. And that's why, as a nation, we have an issue now. We do dispose of far too much. We are putting far too much in landfill. So we can't just say that's the way we've always done it, so carry on doing it. We have to change.
Yeah.
I think that's really a really helpful distinction. When you're budgeting for a project, do you make a formal budget? How do you view the financial aspect of it all?
So for me, I very much say, what are the things that I never want to change, or I have to spend the money that I will never, I don't ever want to spend £1 to take out the pound. So where are those fixed pounds now, and how much do I need? And if I can afford the project based on that, the things that will never change, then we can do the project. If you're in a situation where you have to spend badly to do the project, which you then know 2 years later you're undoing that investment, it would have to be a very exceptional scenario that makes any sense. I think I would even go as far as something like a kitchen. You could get, I would feel comfortable with designing a space for a kitchen, putting the plumbing in and the electrics in, and having wooden shelves there for a couple of years, and a Belfast sink, and a decent, your fridge. That for me is not bad planning, but it would be terrible planning if you were going to put in a 15 grand kitchen, knowing that 2 years later you're going to put a 40k kitchen in. Even if you've got money, I would suggest that's just a stupid decision.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's very opinionated.
No, it's perfect.
I feel like this is something that you've experienced.
Well, it's great though, isn't it? To just feel clear. And I think I really enjoy talking to clients about it too, because I can see in their eyes when they're listening and you're talking about their interior, they take confidence because you're telling them it's okay. Like, just think about this a little bit more. Think about what you really love and get it right.
Jane, I feel like this is perfect timing for you. And I feel like that core approach is really helpful.
Yes. I'm just about to start a renovation.
Oh dear, Jane, has this been like counseling?
Yeah. I think I have seen your projects and I have seen your past projects. And I think in a way, this renovation that we're about to do is our long-term home. And I think for me, I was thinking, I want to make it special and I want to put more effort into how it feels in the space. And I think looking at your projects, I was really inspired, but actually I took away the complete opposite message. I was like, I need to be bolder. I need to move out of my comfort zone. And what I'm taking from what you're saying really is reassuring, because I can definitely do that first step and get the house to its kind of core components. And then, if this is our forever home, then let the joy continue. Experiment and continue and build that space over the coming years, which is what we're going to have to do financially anyway. So for me, that's music to my ears. I can really get on board with that.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad I've helped.
Thank you so much for being with us. It's been so inspiring and just really practical. So thank you for sharing your experience. And if you would like to see photos of Lee's home, then head to our website at homenote.co/stories from site.